we will discuss grounds of opinion when relevant. This is given under section 51 of Evidence Act. What is the purpose of this? By coming to a opinion, whether and up to what extent that is relevant under evidence, that is to be seen under this section. Suppose a excise inspector is having distillery training for 6 months or 1 year. That is not sufficient that he cannot be called an expert. But an excise officer having very long experience in that line, service line, that is about 20 years or 25 years, that is relevant, and basing on that relevancy, he will be declared as an expert under this act. So any expert having a long experience in that line, practical line, so he will be called an expert, and his evidence is supported with reason, that is direct admissible under the Evidence Act. So expert's opinion must be supported with certain reasons. There is a ruling from Bombay High Court also. If the reasons and the reasons are not mentioned by the expert, simply giving the opinion, that is not sufficient. So opinion must be supported with reasons. Then only it becomes a bearing, and that will having a bearing in the case, merit of the case. So that is called expert's opinion. Then coming to certain characters, whether how that is relevant or not. Section 52. In civil cases, character is not relevant. That is called irrelevant. In case of civil cases, it is the incumbent duty of plaintiff to establish his case. He has to prove the case with his evidences and documentary proofs. If the case is proved, then definitely the plaintiff will get a decree. In that case, the character is having no relevancy, and that's why character is not relevant. Even the plaintiff is a bad character man, that will not hamper his case. If the case is established through documents and other evidences and the testimony of the witnesses, that is sufficient to prove the case on behalf of the plaintiff. That's why it is said the character of a witness is not relevant under section 52. Then coming to criminal cases, under section 53, in criminal cases, previous good character is relevant. It is to be seen if the witness or any accused is giving evidence, his previous character is good. Basing on that day, it is relevant. There certain relevancy comes to that, he is man of good character. So in criminal cases, previous good character is very much relevant in judging the evidence of a witness under section 54. Then coming to another section, previous bad character is not relevant. That means if a witness is having any previous bad character, that is having no relevancy. The case has to be seen under which case he has come as a witness or he is cited as a witness by the prosecution. His evidence will be considered only that much. His character is not having any bearing. Whether even if he is a man of bad character, that evidence is having no bearing. Even though he is a man of bad character, if evidence is corroborated with other particulars, and basing on that also, definitely the evidence will be succeeded and the case will be established in favor of the witness. So the previous bad character is not relevant under section 54 of the Indian Evidence Act. Now we will discuss different facts, whether that is judicially noticeable or not. Section 56, that says any fact which is judicially noticeable, it need not be proved. What is the meaning of this term? Once a fact is judicially noticeable, the court has taken a notice of that is not to be proved. Suppose Independence Day, August 15th is Independence Day, everybody knows. So court has taken a judicial notice that August 15th is the national holiday of the country. So that is not to be proved through any gazette notification or any other document. So once that has been taken as accepted by the courts as a judicially, that is accepted, that becomes a evidence. That suppose coming to Sunday is a holiday. For that, no formal proof is not required. Court has taken a judicial notice that every Sunday is a holiday for the court. So basing on that notification or basing on that judicial acceptance, it will be established that those things are established and those things are proved. So there is no formal proof is required. That's why it is called facts judicially noticeable need not be proved under section 56. Then we will discuss different types of evidences under law. What are the evidences? Two types of evidences. First is called primary evidence, that is coming under section 62, and secondary evidence coming under section 63. What is called primary? Any document in its original form is called primary document. When the primary document is admissible and when the primary document is in existence, then definitely that document will be admissible under Evidence Act. When the primary document is missing or it is misplaced or it is not found, then only secondary document will be, or secondary evidence will come into proof. So in case of this primary evidence, whatever the primary document that is proved before the court or that is filed before the court and court has taken cognizance of that, that means the case is, the evidence is established. So that is called primary evidence. Doctor itself is the evidence of a doctor is also a primary evidence. Suppose post-mortem report or any other opinion given by the doctor, the nature of weapon, any opinion or any query given by the investigator to doctor regarding the nature of this weapon and the whether that injury has been caused by that weapon. So these are these papers which is filed by the doctor in original form, that is called primary evidence. So primary evidence is directly admissible under our Evidence Act. Now let us come to section 63, that is called secondary evidence. When the primary evidence is not available, suppose that is misplaced somewhere or that is not in existence, at that time definitely the person will seek the help of secondary evidence. So when primary evidence is missing, destroyed, mutilated or like anything, then only secondary evidence will be come into operation. Otherwise, if primary evidence is available, secondary evidence cannot come into exist. Certified copies of a order, certified copies of any document, these are called secondary evidence. All these are things are coming into picture when the originals are missing or originals are not found. Then copies made from the original by mechanical process. Suppose Xerox copies. These copies are made from the original by the mechanical process. These are coming under the secondary evidence. So if the primary evidence is available, then secondary evidence can be accepted. But we have to remember one thing, you are having different types of courts. Just some courts are taking evidences by following the principle of Indian Evidence Act. These are called judicial courts. Certain courts are, certain tribunals are there. They don't follow our Evidence Act. They follow the principle of natural justice. In case of these tribunals, strict proof is not required. Certain secondary evidence can also be adduced in the case when the primary evidence is having no bearing, having no requirement in the court of, in the different types of tribunal. So tribunals and our courts are completely different from each other. So basing on this, we can say the secondary evidences can be very well established in the tribunals than in comparison to our criminal courts. तो जहाँ ओरिजिनल एविडेंस मिसिंग हो जाता है वहाँ हम लोग सेकेंडरी एविडेंस यूज करते हैं, बट विल गो टू डिफरेंट जुडिशियल कोर्ट्स. कोर्ट विल नेचुरली सीक द असिस्टेंस ऑफ द person by adducing the primary evidence. In absence of primary evidence, it is having no bearing, but in case of the lost or missing, then only secondary. So these are the tidbits relating to primary and secondary evidences. Then we will come to different types of documents, where basically we know that there are two types of documents: public document given under section 74 and private documents given under section 65. What is called public document? Any document that is kept or retained by the public offices, those documents are called public documents. Municipal register, enrollment register, all these are coming under a public document. Your then post-mortem report submitted by doctor to investigator, that is called a public document. Your birth certificate, that is maintained by the municipality, that is a public document. That means public, the meaning of this term public document means anybody can obtain a copy of the same by applying to the competent authority by depositing the requisite charges. So in case of this public document, all the things are available before the public offices. That's why those documents are called public documents. But certain documents are private documents. Those documents which are not public, that is called private. For example, your suppose somebody's school certificate, matriculation certificate or board certificate, that is a private document. That document cannot be obtained by any other person. That suppose a person in the need of a duplicate certificate, duplicate school certificate, that is his own document. That means he has to apply and he will get the. So these are different documents. Certain those are called these private documents. Sometimes the private documents and their nature changes. Suppose a private document is filed before the court and that has been marked exhibit. Once the document has been marked exhibit, that the nature of that document changes. The private document will be changed into a public document. At that time, the other party or any other person, when the document has become a public, anybody can obtain a copy thereof. That's why sometimes in certain cases, see, the private document can be changed to a public document, but not in all cases, and always the documents are having very high bearing, and the public documents are obtained from the public offices. So in this way, different types of documents are classified under our Evidence Act, and they are used when the private documents are filed by somebody privately. He has to prove the case that those documents are private documents. When the public document is established, anybody, either the prosecutor or any person who is the custodian of that document, he can prove the case that is a public document. So these are in nutshell relating to different types of documents, public and private. Now we will examine a very important thing that is coming under section 90, that is called presumption as to documents of 30 years old. What is the presumption? When a document is written by somebody or by some authority and for the last 30 years, so it will be treated as genuine. The contents are genuine and the scribe who has written the document is genuine. Nobody can challenge. So once a document is kept and written for complete 30 years, that will be presumed under section 90 that it is a genuine document, and presumption will come into picture. So basing on that retention of document for a long period by somebody or some authority, the scribe or the writing of the document is to be treated as presumed to be true and correct. So that is coming under section 90. Then we will discuss another very important theory under our Evidence Act, that is called burden of proof. Burden of proof is a very vast chapter. Burden means who will prove the case, under whom the burden is there to establish the case beyond all reasonable doubt. Now let us come to a prosecution case. What is the burden of prosecution? The prosecution has to prove the case beyond all reasonable doubt. What is the burden of the defense? The burden of the accused or defense is to prove the case beyond preponderance of all probabilities. He will prove that he is innocent basing on different probabilities. Different pleas he will take to establish that he is completely innocent. In this way, the burden, in case of civil cases, it is the burden of plaintiff to establish the case. If he gets establish the case, he will get a decree. If he fails to discharge his burden, then definitely the suit will be dismissed. So in this way, burden of proof is a very vital subject, and in different aspect of this our Evidence Act, the burden has to be discharged. In some cases, the burden has to be discharged by the one particular party, but in certain exceptions are there. In some cases, the burden has to be proved by the defense party. Suppose a defense is taking the plea of alibi. In that case, it is the burden of the defense to prove that he was not present at the place of incident. So in that case, his burden is to be discharged very meticulously and sincerely. If he fails to discharge his burden properly, then definitely the case will go against him. So burden of proof is a very vital subject under our law to establish the case by certain parties. So burden of prosecution is different, burden of defense is different. And in case of this, both the parties has to prove their case. If they fail to prove their case, or if they fail to discharge their case, definitely there is every possibility of losing their case. So in this way, the burden of proof has been classified both under criminal law as well as under civil law. Now we will discuss another important aspect, burden of proof of any fact which is within the knowledge of a person, that is given under section 106. Suppose a person is having a knowledge of some fact. His burden is to prove that under section 106. Suppose in one house, at the time of that incident, two persons were occupying a house. One person died, the other person who is in the house, it is his burden to prove that offense. It is his burden to prove that he was present, and he has to explain the entire evidence under this section 106. So this section is very important aspect for prosecution to establish the burden that anybody he is having any personal knowledge, he must give the evidence, he must give his statement before the court, whatever his knowledge is there regarding that incident. So it is very important section under this Evidence Act. So now we will discuss any important chapter that is called Law of Estoppel, that is given under section 115. What is called Law of Estoppel? A person is stopped under law to do certain things. That means, suppose I am giving example. For example, a tenant, a relationship between the landlord and tenant. A tenant is occupying the house of the landlord for a particular period based on certain tenancy agreement. During the continuance of the tenancy agreement, after payment of certain rent, the tenant cannot challenge the title of the landlord, because he has accepted the landlord to be the true owner of that property. So once he has accepted the landlord to be the true owner of that property, subsequently he is stopped under law to challenge regarding the ownership or whether he is having ownership of that property. So in this way, certain restrictions or certain things are there. A party cannot take the plea. Once this caveat emptor formula also is applicable. Once a person is buying something, he has to choose the material in proper perspective. After that, he cannot challenge that the material was not good, the material was defective. Like this, certain he is stopped under law. So just like your formula of res judicata in case of civil law, res judicata. Once a matter is disputed, subsequently the other of the parties are stopped under law, under estoppel law, to raise another dispute for the same cause of action in another court of law. So this is another type of estoppel, that res judicata. So this estoppel law is very much important for deciding a case, and for it is what is the very purpose is to there should be a stoppage of litigation, so that the case should not continue for a very long time. One day the case should be solved. So this is a formula to stop the vexatious cases, to multiple the same, and for this complete litigation should not continue for a very long period. So this law of estoppel is also coming under a very vital subject under our Evidence Act. Then coming to another very important aspect of law, that is called child's evidence. The evidence of a child, that is given under section 118 of Evidence Act. Who may testify? The section says that who may testify. That means before accepting the evidence of a child, his evidence to be scrutinized very carefully. This is the judgment, this is the decision given by our apex court of the country. A child's witness is to be seen very carefully, and before its acceptance it must be scrutinized very carefully, without any scrutinizing the evidence of a child, because the child is vulnerable to any tutoring. Anybody tutor him, he will say like that. So in that case, the evidence of the child should be accepted before accepting the evidence in proper format. That's why the evidence of a child is very much essential, and before accepting the same, it must be carefully examined. Then only the court will scrutinize the same, and thereafter court will apply the same by appreciating the evidence. So the child's evidence is very much relevant under law. So now let us say, suppose a child has given evidence in a case. What will be the effect? Simply on the basis of the evidence of a child, a person cannot be punished. That child's evidence must lend corroboration with other particulars in different other forms. If it is getting corroboration from other forms, then only it is having certain bearing in the case. Simply basing on the evidence of a child, a case cannot be established against a person beyond all reasonable doubt, because there is a doubt, because it is not getting corroboration from any other independent sources. The rest sections will be discussed in the next class.